You're listening to Fast Facts Perio Edition. And now, here's your host, Katrina Sanders.
Hello, and welcome to Fast Facts Perio Edition. This week, you guys, I cannot believe it. I am so excited to announce the New Kids on the Block. I know what you're thinking. You were probably just like me and you had a New Kids on the Block lunchbox growing up. No, I'm not talking about those new kids. And if you are a Gen Zer or younger, my apologies for giving a millennial reference here. But we're talking about the New Kids on the Block when it comes to the classification of what we are now calling the potential new periodontal pathogens. You guys, this is crazy. So just published a handful of days ago, and this is where you heard it here first, folks, on Fast Facts, just a few days ago, a grouping of 8 different types of microorganisms have been published as the potential new kids on the block when it comes to periodontitis. So, okay, when we take a look at how we implicate specific types of microorganisms as they relate to perio, we look at a myriad of things. We recognize that periodontitis is loosely defined as a polymicrobial complex disease process. You've probably heard me say that term a bajillion times. But when we talk about polymicrobial, that's the first term, polymicrobial, it means that periodontitis by its very nature is developed from coordinated efforts of these bacteria. Like, I want you to think these are bacteria that have formed their own colonies, their own communities. So some of these bacteria are like post men and women, right? Male men and women that would transfer or move messaging. Some people are repairers, construction workers, and they rebuild, they repair. Some bacteria are researchers. They're able to study the different types of anti-microbe components that we throw at them, and they begin to develop different ways to fight or combat the things that we're trying to use, like enzymes that break down the antibiotics we try to use to kill them, right? So these bacteria have these teeny tiny little colonies, and they all have coordinated efforts, events, descriptions, or jobs that keep them all interconnected, one into the other. And so now we're beginning to understand that it is these coordinated efforts or these events that are occurring inside of the biofilm that allows for an acceleration of the disease process. So inside of all of this, we look at how these coordinated efforts happen. And it was notated inside of these criterion that when we talk about bacteria that have a high propensity or high incidence for periodontitis, we're specifically talking about strong evidence in which these bacteria have the ability to colonize multiple sites in the oral cavity, both shallow and deep sites. The amount of the bacteria that is able to colonize in this area, and then how pathogenic this bacteria is, or what are some of the characteristics or attributes of this bacteria that allows periodontitis to thrive. So inside of this new research study, again, just came out a handful of days ago, talking about the new kids on the block. Now we are looking at the fact that there is a statistically significant involvement of 8 bacteria in which these bacteria are demonstrating strong evidence. They are significantly elevated in periodontitis patients when compared with healthy patients. And inside of these bacteria, they have the ability to cause not only oral disease, but as you will see in a hot minute, they also have the ability to cause some systemic diseases as well. There are 3 that have been of really great focus inside of this research study. So the first is a bacteria called Chronobacter shiki or C. shiki Z. This particular gram-negative bacteria is a bacteria that is not typically considered a part of our normal oral cavity or our GI tract. This actually is kind of an interesting bug. This Chronobacter is a germ or a bug that is actually found naturally in our environment. It oftentimes lives in dry foods. So think about things like powdered infant formulas, powdered milks, even herbal teas or starches. It also is found in contaminated feeding items like a contaminated breast pump. And it is a concern, particularly for our pediatric patient population, because these Chronobacter infections are quite serious for babies, particularly under 2 months, or for babies who were born prematurely in which they don't have an immune system to fight back. These infections can also get very serious for our elderly patient population or for individuals whose bodies are immunocompromised. So think about HIV positive individuals, organ transplants, or cancer patients. Now, we oftentimes find, think about your babies younger than 2 months who cannot breastfeed, or think about babies who are breastfeeding and may be breastfeeding from equipment that's been contaminated, or our elderly patient population who are taking some of these dried food products as a means of getting nutritional supplementation. So this can kind of be a bit of a concern here. This microorganism is an opportunistic pathogen, again, of food origin. It has been found in the subgingival biofilm of HIV patients who have necrotizing forms of periodontitis. We have not seen this systemically in healthy patients. And so we're trying to identify right now, what is it about the microbiota of a healthy patient that is able to control this Chronobacter infection? The next is a bacteria, a Staphylococci warneri. Now, this one is a bit interesting. This Staph warneri is actually a bacteria that is often found on our skins. It's in smaller concentrations on our skin, and it actually has the ability, it's been studied in our urology departments because it does have the ability to cause pretty extreme urinary tract infections. Now, a few things to note about this particular bacteria. This guy is a potential new pathogen in non-oral severe infections. So we've started to find other medical colleagues in other areas of the body starting to discover that this guy of staph origin certainly could be implicated. So we are concerned there. And interestingly enough, we can find high concentrations of Staph warneri in individuals who have prosthetic devices, catheters, or immunocompromised conditions in which they could develop infections, particularly opportunistic infections, quite sooner. So think about your patients who have prosthetic devices, prosthetic joints, catheters, or are already immunocompromised, where this staph infection could create a major problem. The last bacteria that we're looking at is Enterococcus faecalis. This is a commensal microorganism of our GI tract, but it has been found as a bacteria that likes to live in other parts of the body. It is quite a frequent bacteria that has been isolated from bacteremia, and it causes some of the most post-operative infections in intensive care units. So we oftentimes will see Enterococcus faecalis implicated in individuals who are experiencing hospital-acquired infections or are experiencing delayed wound healing. Regarding oral infections, we have actually seen this associated with cases of root canal treatment failure. We have seen it in high concentrations in periodontitis in many geographical surveys, and we have found it in high concentrations of subgingival plaque samples in individuals with that periodontitis. We've found it in early onset perio, so your younger patients who are experiencing this. And it is suggested that E. faecalis is populating periodontal pockets with super infecting microorganisms. So we're still trying to prove some of this data, but we do believe that individuals who are already immunocompromised, that the presence of this bug could allow for acceleration in the breakdown of periodontitis and allowing other opportunistic infections to form. So stay tuned. We're seeing a lot of these. We're talking about, even Staph aureus and E. coli as moderate evidentiary pieces. Aureus developing several different types of toxins that we do see can be implicated in respiratory infections. So we're still developing this. The research is still new, but I had to introduce you to the new kids on the block. This is 3 of the 8 various types of pathogens that are now being proposed as newly identified pathogens in periodontitis. This has been another episode of Fast Facts Perio Edition with Katrina Sanders. Please feel free to reach me on Instagram at The Dental Wine Genist or on my website, www.katrinasanders.com. Cheers.